That Christmas Eve, my stepmother slapped me until my lip bled right before midnight mass. I didn't know that. Just a few steps from the house, my rich grandfather was sitting in a dark car, witnessing everything through the windshield. When I opened the car door and sat next to him, my whole family's life turned in a direction no one expected. My name is Freya Simmons. I'm 28 years old, and I am, for all intents and purposes, the unpaid maid for my father and stepmother. I live in a suffocatingly neat suburban house just outside Cedar Heights, Ohio. By day, I'm a content manager at a decent marketing firm called Northbridge Story Lab, managing digital campaigns and writing copy that sounds far more confident than I actually feel. By night, and every morning, and all weekend, I'm just available. My mother, the one who gave me her eyes and her love for old books, died when I was young, too young to remember much more than a feeling of warmth and safety. My father, Carl Simmons, did what many lonely men do. He remarried. He married Brenda. Brenda is a woman built of sharp angles and even sharper judgments, all hidden beneath a thick, suffocating veneer of Christian piety. She is devout, obsessively so. Her entire public identity is wrapped up in St. Gabriel's Chapel, her volunteer work, and her status as a pillar of the community. She also brought her own daughter into the marriage, Chloe, who is now 16 and has perfected the art of weaponized incompetence, learned directly from her mother. I moved back in 2 years ago. The decision felt logical at the time. My lease was up. I wanted to aggressively pay down my student loans, and my father had mentioned how much they missed having me around. "It'll be just like old times, Freya," he'd said, his voice hopeful. "We can all help each other. Save some money." The reality was vastly different. Helping each other quickly translated into me doing everything. My savings account grew, but my sense of self evaporated. I became the house's invisible engine. My alarm goes off at 5:45 every morning, not for my 9-to-5 job, but to get downstairs before anyone else. I make the coffee, the way Brenda likes it, strong, but not bitter. I empty the dishwasher from the night before, the one I loaded. I start breakfast, bacon for Dad, a fruit smoothie for Chloe, who is always watching her figure, and a plain egg white scramble for Brenda. I eat a protein bar while leaning against the counter, checking my work emails on my phone. "Freya, is that bacon crispy?" Brenda's voice cuts through the kitchen before she even enters. She walks in, pulling her plush robe tighter, her eyes immediately scanning for imperfections. "I made it just how Dad likes it," I reply, keeping my voice neutral. "Good. Chloe needs a ride to school in 30 minutes. Her study group is meeting early. Make sure her smoothie is in the insulated cup. She hates it when it gets warm." She pours her coffee and sits at the table. Not one word of thanks. Dad shuffles in moments later, burying his face in the newspaper. "Morning, Freya. Smells good." "Morning, Dad." Chloe floats in at the last possible second, phone already pressed to her ear, giggling. "Oh my God, literally," she says to her friend, before muting the call. "Freya, did you make my smoothie? I'm late." "It's on the counter, Chloe." "Love you, Daddy. Love you, Mom." She kisses them both, grabs the smoothie, and heads for the door, leaving me to trail after her, keys in hand. This is the routine. I am the chauffeur, the cook, the laundress, the cleaner. When I get home from my actual paying job at 6, I am expected to start dinner. Brenda and Carl treat Chloe with a tenderness that physically aches to watch. They coo over her grades, her social life. When my dad bought her a brand new convertible for her 16th birthday, I had to smile and say how wonderful it was, all while remembering how I'd saved for 2 years to buy my own 10-year-old sedan. With me, their voices change. The tone is one of command, of expectation. "Freya, you're an adult now," Brenda says constantly, usually when handing me a pile of her dry cleaning. "You have to understand what it means to sacrifice for your family." My sacrifice, it seems, is total. Theirs is non-existent. The most jarring part of living with Brenda is the whiplash between her private and public personas. At home, her face is set in a permanent state of mild disappointment, her eyes cataloging my every failure, the towels I forgot to move from the washer to the dryer, the single dish I left in the sink, the fact I was 15 minutes late from work because of traffic. But on Sundays, at St. Gabriel's Chapel, she transforms. As she walks through those heavy oak doors, a beatific smile melts across her face. She becomes Saint Brenda of Cedar Heights. She hugs fellow parishioners, her voice dripping with honey. "Oh, Susan, it is so wonderful to see you. Your casserole for the bake sale was simply divine." She clasps Father Michael's hands, her head bowed slightly. "Father, your sermon last week truly moved me. We are so blessed to have your guidance." And everyone, absolutely everyone, buys it. They see Brenda Simmons as the epitome of a selfless, family-oriented woman. She took in her husband's daughter as her own. I once heard a woman whisper to another as I stood right behind them, holding Brenda's Bible. Raised her right alongside her own Chloe. Such a big heart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask them if a big heart meant delegating 100% of the household chores to the daughter she took in. The favoritism is blatant and shameless. When Chloe dented the bumper of her new car, Brenda swept in, handled the insurance, and told my father it was just a scratch from the grocery store. When I accidentally spilled a glass of red wine on the beige carpet last year, Brenda wept about the expense and my carelessness, forcing me to pay the $200 cleaning bill from my own salary, despite the fact I was serving her guests at her dinner party. And then there is midnight mass. In this house, midnight mass on Christmas Eve isn't just a religious service. It's Brenda's personal Academy Awards. It is the one night of the year where her performance of the perfect Catholic family must be flawless. The outfits are planned weeks in advance. Chloe always has a new, expensive dress. Dad wears his best suit. Brenda wears something elegant and modest, usually in a deep red or forest green. My role? I am the stage manager. I prepare the elaborate spread of snacks and mulled wine for before the service. I make sure everyone's clothes are pressed and ready, and invariably, I am the driver, navigating the snowy roads to St. Gabriel's, ensuring we arrive early enough to get our pew. The third from the front, I am the one who sits on the end, slightly separate, while they sit together, a perfect, holy trinity. There is one person who is never part of this perfect picture. My maternal grandfather, Walter Hayes. My mother's father. We used to be close when I was a little girl, before she passed. He was warm and funny, with a laugh that shook his whole body. But after Brenda arrived, the visits dwindled. Brenda always had an excuse. Freya has too much homework. It's too long a drive. Carl, he's such a curmudgeon. Darling, he'll just spoil the mood. Now he's just a ghost, a name rarely spoken. Brenda, when forced to refer to him, speaks with a dismissive chill. "Oh, your grandfather," she'll say, as if tasting something sour. He's a very difficult, stingy man, prefers to live all alone out in the countryside, best left to his own devices. My father just nods, ever the peacekeeper. He and your mother had a complicated relationship. Freya, it's for the best. But I knew. Deep down, it was Brenda who had severed the tie. She didn't like any link to my mother's side of the family, any reminder that she was not my father's first, or only, love. The first real crack in their facade appeared a few months ago. I was coming downstairs late at night to get a glass of water, moving quietly on the carpeted steps. I heard their voices from the den, low and intense. Brenda's voice, specifically. "Have to tolerate her. Carl, I don't like it any more than you do, but we just have to hold on." "I know, Brenda. I know." My father's tired reply. "But she's getting more distant." "Let her be distant," Brenda snapped. "As long as she stays under this roof, we are doing our part. When that old man's fortune finally passes, it's all supposed to come to us, through her. We can't risk him changing his mind if he thinks she's been cast out. So you will smile, and I will smile, and we will endure it." I stood frozen on the stairs, my blood turning to ice. Through her, they weren't just using me for free labor. They were performing for an audience of one. My stingy, difficult grandfather, Walter. I was a prop in a long con, a placeholder for an inheritance they felt entitled to. That knowledge changed everything. It didn't free me, not yet, but it planted a seed of cold, hard resentment that I watered every time I washed Chloe's dishes or fetched Brenda's coat. I love my father, or at least, I love the memory of the man he was before Brenda, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who read me bedtime stories. Now, he's a shadow, content to let his wife rule his home and his daughter, as long as it keeps the peace. My desire for his approval, for him to see me, is what's kept me here, scrubbing their floors, telling myself, I'm an adult, I'm mature, I can handle this burden for the sake of the family. But I'm not handling it, I'm being consumed by it. I'm 28 years old, and I feel like a supporting character in my own life. A week ago, Brenda started her Christmas planning. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a fresh notebook and a sharp pen in hand, a calculating gleam in her eye that I'd come to recognize. This year, midnight mass will be very special, she announced to my father, though her eyes slid to me, standing at the sink. Everything must be absolutely perfect, flawless. She paused, and her voice dropped, becoming steel wrapped in velvet. We cannot let her ruin things again. I stopped scrubbing the pot. My back was to them, but I could feel the weight of her stare. Ruin things again? What was she talking about? What had I supposedly ruined before? The question hung in the air, unanswered. A promise of a storm I didn't even know was gathering. Brenda's threat. We cannot let her ruin things again, echoed in my head long after she left the kitchen. It was a strange accusation. In my memory, I was the one who saved things, who held them together. I was the one picking up the pieces, polishing the silver, making the last-minute runs to the grocery store for the heavy cream Brenda forgot. What had I ever ruined? Then I realized, for Brenda, ruining things meant any moment where the flawless facade cracked. It was any time I failed to be invisible, any time my own needs inconveniently surfaced and threatened her narrative of the perfect, selfless matriarch. My holidays had been a long string of these almost ruined moments, salvaged only by my exhaustion. While my colleagues at Northbridge posted Instagram stories from holiday parties, clinking glasses in sequined dresses, I was usually elbow-deep in turkey brine or scrubbing roasting pans. Christmas at our house was Brenda's annual performance. She would direct the set, which was the dining room, and I would be the entire backstage crew. She loved to post photos of the results. Another blessed Christmas dinner with my precious family. She would caption a brightly lit photo of the glazed ham I had cooked. Feeling so grateful for these moments, the photos never showed me. I was usually the one taking the picture, my hair smelling like onions and thyme, a smudge of flour on my cheek. My 25th birthday was the masterpiece of my exploitation. It felt significant, a quarter century. My friends from work had planned to take me out for drinks, insisting I couldn't spend another milestone birthday at home. I'd actually bought a new dress, a dark green velvet one I'd been saving. I mentioned it to Brenda a week in advance, casually, trying to mark the territory. Just so you know, on the 14th, I'll be going out with some colleagues for my birthday. Brenda's face softened into a mask of maternal concern. Oh, Freya, darling, that's wonderful. 25. My goodness. She paused, stirring her coffee, her brow furrowing. The 14th? Oh, that's terrible timing. I knew what was coming. That's the same night as the St. Gabriel's Parish Council dinner, she said, her voice dropping. And Carl and I are hosting the pre-dinner cocktails for the board. I am desperate for help. Honey, Chloe has a huge biology midterm. She can't possibly be distracted, and I can't be in two places at once. She placed her hand on mine. Her skin was cold. Just this once. Could you possibly push your little party? Just help me with the appetizers and keep an eye on things? We can celebrate your birthday properly on the weekend. A real family celebration." Like a fool. I agreed. The little party was canceled. The velvet dress stayed in the closet. My 25th birthday was spent passing trays of bacon-wrapped scallops and mini quiches to Brenda's church friends. I refilled their wine glasses. I listened to them praise Brenda for her effortless hospitality. My father, beaming beside her, accepted the compliments. By the time the last guest left, it was 11:30 at night. I cleared the glasses, loaded the dishwasher, and wiped the sticky wine rings off the counters. The clock in the hall chimed midnight. I was officially 25. No one said happy birthday, not Brenda, not my father. When I brought it up 2 days later, my voice small, Brenda looked genuinely baffled. "Oh, heavens, Freya, it completely slipped my mind. We were just so overwhelmed by the council dinner. You understand. Well, we'll get you a card this week." She never did. The weekend celebration never materialized. It wasn't just my birthday, it was every gathering. At Thanksgiving with Brenda's extended family, I was the designated coat taker. I was the one who managed the children's table. I was the one who cleared the plates while everyone else settled in to watch football. I was always the designated driver for any event, using my gas, my car, because Brenda doesn't like driving in the dark, and my father likes to have a second glass of wine. Brenda would just smile, patting my arm in front of her relatives. "Freya is such a wonderful help. We're a team, aren't we? I believe in family pulling together. That's what makes us strong." Chloe, of course, had learned from the master. She saw me not as a sister, but as an unpaid personal assistant. "Freya, can you look over my history paper?" she'd ask, batting her eyelashes. "You're so good at that writing stuff." Looking over inevitably meant rewriting 3 of the 5 pages. "Freya, this new Instagram filter makes my skin look weird. Can you fix the lighting?" Fixing it meant a 30-minute editing session in Photoshop. I'd see the results later, a screenshot of her paper with a bright red A+ and the caption, "Hard work pays off, all my own work," or the perfectly lit selfie. "Just woke up like this," which I knew had taken 45 minutes and my technical skills to produce. She never tagged me. She never said thank you. It simply never occurred to her that my time had value. I did try to set a boundary. Once, about a year ago, I was feeling particularly suffocated. The savings plan was working, but my mental health was cratering. I felt like I was 19 again, not 27. I decided to be an adult. I researched apartments, found a small 1-bedroom closer to my office, and brought it up at dinner. "Dad, Brenda," I started, my heart hammering. "I'm so grateful you've let me stay here and save money. It's been a huge help, but I found a great little apartment, and I think it's time for me to have my own space again." Silence. A heavy, awful silence. My father looked down at his mashed potatoes as if they held the secrets to the universe. Brenda put her fork down. Very, very slowly. Her eyes welled with tears. It was terrifyingly fast. "Oh, Carl," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Did you hear that? Her own space." She turned her glistening eyes to me. "Freya, I don't understand. After everything I've done for you, everything I've tried to do, to make this a home for you, is my cooking not good enough? Is the house not clean enough for you?" "No, Brenda, it's not that at all. I have tried so hard," she continued, her voice rising with practiced sorrow, "to be the mother you lost, and you just want to leave me." My father, galvanized by the sight of his wife's tears, sprang to her defense. "Freya, look what you've done. You've upset Brenda, after all she does for this family." "I'm not trying to upset anyone," I pleaded, my voice sounding childish even to my own ears. "I'm 27 years old. I'm just trying to take the next step in my life." "That's a very selfish way of looking at it, Freya," my father said, his tone hardening. "Family is supposed to stick together. Brenda is right. You're being selfish." This is your home. What's the rush? Just, let's table this discussion. We'll talk about it next year. For now, just finish your dinner and apologize to Brenda." I stared at him, apologize, for wanting to move out. I realized the mechanics of the trap then. Any step I took toward my own life would be reframed as a selfish attack on Brenda. Any boundary was proof that I was ungrateful. My desire for independence was not a normal part of adulthood. It was a personal betrayal. So I stayed, and I apologized. My isolation wasn't just within the house. It was from everyone on the outside, especially my grandfather. My warmest childhood memories were with Grandpa Walter. After my mom died, he was my last living link to her. He was warm and solid, and his house smelled like sawdust and pipe tobacco. He'd taught me how to whittle a small bird from a block of wood. But Brenda cut that cord with ruthless efficiency. "It's a 2-hour drive. Freya, you have finals coming up. He's very old-fashioned. Honey, he won't understand your job or your friends. He's just so judgmental. Carl, I don't feel comfortable having him for the holidays. He always makes you feel inadequate." It worked. I hadn't seen him in person in almost 3 years. We'd exchange polite, short phone calls on birthdays, but the closeness was gone, starved by distance and Brenda's excuses. But a memory surfaced, something I hadn't understood at the time, about 2 years ago. Right after I moved back in, I came home early from work. I walked into the kitchen and found Brenda standing at the table, her back to me. She was clutching a thick, cream-colored envelope. It looked heavy. It looked legal. I saw the return address clearly. It was from a law firm, and above it, printed neatly, was his name, Walter Hayes. Brenda was staring at it, her knuckles white. She hadn't heard me enter when I finally cleared my throat. "Hi, I'm home." She jumped, startled, and immediately shoved the envelope under a pile of department store catalogs. "Freya!" Her voice was too bright, too strained. "You're home early. Wonderful. Can you start on the salad for dinner?" She never mentioned the letter. I trained to avoid conflict, never asked about it, but I never forgot the look on her face. It wasn't annoyance, it was fear. Why do I stay? It's the question I ask myself every night as I load their dinner plates into the dishwasher. I'm not weak. I know I'm not. I manage a team of 4 at Northbridge. I handle difficult clients and million-dollar marketing budgets. I negotiate contracts. But in this house, I am paralyzed by a desperate, childish need to keep the peace, to earn an ounce of the approval they pour over Chloe so easily. I keep hoping that one day, Brenda will look at me and see me, a daughter, or at least an ally, not a servant. But the content manager in me, the part that understands narratives and branding, knows that's not the story I'm in. So, a few months ago, I started doing what I do best. I started documenting. On my work laptop, buried 5 folders deep in a client archive, there is a password-protected file named Northbridge Q4 Metrics, docx. It is not a metrics report, it is a log. October 4th, Brenda borrowed $50 from my wallet for Chloe's field trip. Said she'd pay me back. She has not. October 29th, cooked and cleaned for Brenda's 14-person dinner party, was told by Dad I didn't mingle enough and seemed sulky. November 17th, Chloe took my car without asking and returned it with the gas tank on empty. Brenda said I should be more generous and that it's just a car. December 5th, overheard Brenda tell Dad they had to tolerate me because of the old man's fortune. It started as a way to vent, to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that the slights were real, but lately, as I look at the dates, the times, the specific, cruel little details, it feels less like a journal and more like evidence. I close the file on my laptop. The house is dark and quiet. Everyone is asleep. I stand in the upstairs hallway, looking at the closed doors of their bedrooms, my father's, Brenda's, Chloe's. And the question hits me, colder and sharper than the December air outside. If I vanished from this house tonight, truly just disappeared, would anyone here actually miss me? Or would they just wake up tomorrow, annoyed that the coffee wasn't made and the chauffeur was gone? The anxiety from Brenda's comment hung over the house for the next few days. It was like a low-grade fever, making everything feel slightly wrong, slightly sick. We cannot let her ruin things again. It implied a history I didn't have access to, a past failure that was being held against me. I searched my memory, but all I found were images of myself, tired and compliant. The answer, when it came, didn't come from inside the house. It came from my pocket. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just a few days before Christmas. I was at my desk at Northbridge Story Lab, deep in the middle of drafting a social media campaign for a new line of organic dog food. It was mindless, easy work, a welcome escape. My office phone was off. My door was closed. I was, for a few hours, just Freya Simmons, content manager, not Freya Simmons, unpaid domestic. My personal cell phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it, expecting a text from Chloe needing a ride from band practice an hour early. But it was a call. The name on the screen made my heart stop. Walter Hayes. I hadn't seen his name on my phone in, God, at least a year. My grandfather. I snatched the phone, my hand trembling slightly, and ducked into the empty conference room. Hello? My voice was thinner than I wanted. Freya, it's your grandfather. His voice was just as I remembered, but also different. It was the voice of an old man. Yes, a little rougher, a little slower, but the steel underneath it was unmistakable. This was not the difficult, stingy recluse Brenda described. This was a man who knew his own mind. Grandpa? Oh my God. Hi, it's so good to hear you. It's good to hear you. Too, child. I was just sitting here, thinking about you. How is that job? That Northbridge place? Are they treating you well? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't the polite, surface-level, how are you, I'd grown used to. He wanted a real answer. It's good. It's busy. I'm a content manager now. I like it. Mostly. Good. Content manager. That sounds important. I hope they're paying you what you're worth. Your mother. She was always sharp as a tack with words. I felt a sudden, sharp sting behind my eyes. The mention of my mother, so casual and warm, was a language I hadn't heard in my own home for a decade. Thank you. Grandpa, I'm doing okay. There was a pause. I heard him take a breath. I've been meaning to come see you, Freya, but it seems some people over at your house are very good at managing your schedule. Every time I've hinted at a visit, I'm told you're swamped with work, or out with friends, or training for a marathon. I didn't realize you'd become a long-distance runner. The dark humor in his voice was another forgotten thing. I laughed, a small, nervous sound. I'm definitely not training for a marathon, Grandpa. I didn't think so. Another pause, this one more calculated. Tell me, do you and your family still attend that service at St. Gabriel's Chapel? The one in the middle of the night? My stomach tightened. Midnight Mass, yes, every year. It's Brenda's most important night of the year. We never miss it. Is that so? I could almost hear him nodding. Her most important night. Well, that's good to know. He cleared his throat. You know, I'm an old man, but I still have my driver's license, and I've been feeling a bit cooped up. Who knows? I might just take a drive on Christmas Eve. I might find myself at St. Gabriel's, see what all the fuss is about. A strange, potent mix of emotions flooded me. A bright, childish flicker of joy that he wanted to see me, immediately followed by a wave of pure, cold dread. Brenda would implode if he showed up, unannounced, on her night. Grandpa, that would be wonderful, I stammered, already trying to manage the fallout. But I should warn you, she's planning this whole big dinner right before. It's all very scheduled. Freya? He cut me off, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. I'm not coming for Brenda's dinner. I'm not coming to see Brenda. I'm coming to see my granddaughter. If I come, I'll be there to pray, and I'll see what I see. The line clicked before I could even say goodbye. I stood in the empty, glass-walled conference room, staring at my phone. My heart was pounding a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I'll see what I see. I drove home that evening in a daze, the traffic on the interstate fading to a dull roar. For the first time, I felt like I had a secret, a real one, a powerful one. I walked in the house, kicked off my shoes, and headed straight for my room. I was smiling. It was a small, private smile, but it was there. I felt lighter. I was halfway up the stairs when her voice stopped me. "And what's that smile for?" I turned. Brenda was standing in the shadows of the downstairs hallway, not in the kitchen or the living room, but just watching. She had a dish towel in her hand, but she wasn't wiping anything. She was just standing there, her body perfectly still. "You look like you just won the lottery. Freya, who called you?" Her voice was sweet, too sweet. It was the syrupy, saccharine tone she used at church, the one that always set my teeth on edge. It was the voice of a predator pretending to be a lamb. My first instinct, the one honed by years of her training, was to lie. A recruiter, a friend from college. But the conversation with my grandfather had put a sliver of his own steel into my spine. Why should I lie? "It was Grandpa Walter," I said, my voice clear in the quiet hall. "He just called to say hello, to wish me a Merry Christmas." I watched her face. It was like watching a beautiful porcelain mask crack in real time. The beatific smile didn't fade. It froze, and then it hardened. The muscles in her jaw bunched. Her eyes went flat and cold. And for one terrifying second, I saw the raw, unfiltered anger she kept hidden. It was the face of a woman who had just seen her grandest plan threatened. And then, just as quickly, the mask was back. She blinked, and the warmth flooded back into her eyes. A performance so seamless it was almost brilliant. She let out a bright, brittle laugh. "Walter! My goodness, what a surprise!" She stepped out of the shadows, moving toward the stairs, and glided past me to go up to the second floor. She walked into my bedroom, a subtle, infuriating invasion of my only private space. She began to straighten the picture frames on my dresser, the ones of my college graduation and my mother. "Well," she said, her back to me, "that's just lovely. Freya, it is so important to keep in touch with family, especially the elderly. We must honor them. Good for you for being so thoughtful." The words were perfect. The subtext was pure poison. She wasn't congratulating me. She was warning me. I knew, standing in my own doorway, that I hadn't just told her about a phone call. I had just confirmed her worst fear. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the look on her face, about the overheard conversation. That old man's fortune, through her. My unease drove me from my bed around 2 a.m. I needed water. I needed to move. I crept down the stairs, my feet silent on the thick carpet runner. I was halfway down when I heard them. Voices, from the kitchen, low, urgent, and angry. Brenda and my father. I froze on the steps, my body sinking into the shadows. "He called her, Carl." Brenda's voice was a furious hiss, all the sweetness burned away. "Not us. He called her, at her office, after all this time." "Brenda, please, keep your voice down." My father's tired, placating murmur. "You'll wake her up. He's an old man. Maybe he just wanted to hear his granddaughter's voice. It's almost Christmas." "Don't be a fool. He's not just an old man. He's a calculating old bastard. He doesn't do anything just because. He's checking up. He's testing us. After that threatening letter from his lawyers 2 years ago, we cannot afford a single mistake." My blood went cold. The letter. The legal envelope I'd seen her hide. It wasn't just a letter. It was a threatening letter. My father sighed. "What do you think he wants?" "He wants to see her. He wants to get her alone," Brenda snapped. "And of course, he'll ask about the mass. I know he will. He's trying to get her alone, get her to cry on his shoulder, paint me as the wicked stepmother. If that old man decides to change his mind, Carl, if he changes that will, every plan we've made, every sacrifice I've made, everything I've put up with for the last 10 years, it's all finished, gone. There was a heavy silence. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. So what do we do? My father asked. He sounded defeated. We watch her. Brenda's voice was sharp, decisive. That night, Christmas Eve, you keep her busy. I'll keep her busy. She doesn't get a single second alone. She doesn't leave our sight. She doesn't talk to him. She doesn't even see him. We go as a family. We sit as a family, and we leave as a family. Do you understand me, Carl? I understand, he said, the sound of a man folding completely. We'll just make it a nice family night, all of us together. It'll be fine. I backed up the stairs, my heart feeling like a block of ice in my chest. Will, plan, lawyers. This wasn't a family. This was a hostile business negotiation. And I was the central asset. The next morning, Brenda was a different person. She was bright, cheerful, and unnervingly affectionate. She called a family meeting at the breakfast table, a term that was usually reserved for bad news. Family, she announced, beaming at us. Chloe was texting. My father was nursing his coffee. I was just trying to seem normal. I have finalized our wonderful schedule for Christmas Eve. It's going to be so perfect, so cozy. She laid out her battle plan, disguised as a lovely holiday tradition. We'll start with a beautiful, intimate family dinner before Mass. Just the four of us. No stress, no big crowds, just us. She turned her high-beam smile on me. Freya, darling, since you're such the chef, I was hoping you would handle that. I was thinking your amazing roast chicken, the one with the rosemary and lemon, and your garlic mashed potatoes, and maybe that lovely apple crumble you make. Nothing too heavy, just perfect. The assignments continued. We'll eat at 7 sharp. That gives us plenty of time to clean up together, she said, her eyes meeting mine. Get changed into our beautiful outfits, and then we can all drive to St. Gabriel's. We'll arrive as a family, right at 11:30, just as the carols begin. Won't that be special? It sounded lovely. It was a prison. It was a schedule designed to have me chained to the stove, and then the sink, until the last possible second. It guaranteed I would have no time, no energy, no opportunity to meet anyone. It was a lockdown. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. I might be at St. Gabriel's. I had to try. Brenda, that sounds like a lot of work right before Mass, I said. Amazed, my voice came out steady. I was actually hoping to go to St. Gabriel's a little early this year, separate from you all. Brenda's eyebrow arched, a perfect questioning curve. Early? Whatever for? A few of my friends from work, Sarah and Mark, they go to St. Gabriel's too. We were going to meet up, just to say Merry Christmas before the service begins. It was a clumsy lie, but it was plausible. Brenda's smile became a portrait of profound pity. Oh, Freya. Friends? Friends are lovely, of course, but you can see them anytime. You can see them on New Year's. You can see them the weekend after, Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is for family. That's the one night of the year that is sacred. Surely your friends can understand that your family comes first. I looked at my father. He was my last hope. Please, see what she is doing. Help me. He cleared his throat and looked down at his placemat. Brenda's right. Freya, it's one night, and, you owe your stepmother a lot. She does so much to keep this house running. The lie was so thick he almost choked on it. The least you can do is be grateful and help her make the night special. She's been planning this for us. Grateful. The word was a hammer. Oh, the word was a cage. I looked back at Brenda. She was sipping her coffee, her eyes sparkling with victory over the rim of the mug, and as she put the mug down, I saw it. Her left hand, resting on the arm of her wooden chair, was clenching and unclenching, gripping the armrest so hard her knuckles were bone white. It was the same silent, white-knuckled tension I'd seen when she was holding Walter's legal letter. She wasn't just planning a cozy dinner. She was defending her territory, and she was terrified. I was in my room later that afternoon, staring out the window at the gray, frozen lawn, feeling utterly, completely trapped, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Grandpa Walter. My fingers were shaking as I opened it. The message was short, but it landed like a rescue flare. Freya, I have a feeling that night might be difficult. If you feel unsafe, or if you just need to get out, I want you to step outside the church. Just walk out the front doors. I might be parked right near the front. I read it once, then twice. He'd used the word unsafe. Not uncomfortable, not unhappy, not if you get annoyed. Unsafe. He knew. He didn't know the details, the overheard fights, the financial plot, but he knew her. He knew the dynamic. He wasn't just offering a visit. He was offering me an escape hatch. The cozy family dinner on Christmas Eve had just become a ticking clock, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just waiting for it to be over. I was waiting for my chance. I was late. A last-minute client server at Northbridge had crashed right at 4:45 in the afternoon, and the all-hands-on-deck emergency meant I didn't get out of the office until well after 5. By the time I hit the highway on December 24th, the sun was long gone and alight. Freezing snow was making the roads slick. My shoulders ached from the tension of gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't worried about missing a party. I was worried about being late for my shift. I skidded into the driveway at 6:05, my stomach churning with anxiety. I burst through the garage door, my arms full of my laptop bag and, of course, the extra bag of cranberries Brenda had texted me to buy. The house. It smelled like a magazine, like pine and cinnamon and expensive candles. And from the living room, I heard the sound of a soaring choir on the stereo and bright, tinkling laughter. Click, 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 the unmistakable sound of a phone camera. I stood in the entryway, invisible. Through the arch, I could see them, Brenda, Chloe, and my father, clustered around the towering, perfectly decorated Christmas tree. They were all dressed. Brenda had on a crimson cashmere sweater set. Chloe, a dark velvet dress. My father was in a crisp button-down. They were posed, heads tilted together, beaming. "Oh, that one is just precious." "Carl," Brenda chimed, looking at my father's phone screen. "Chloe, darling, tilt your chin." "Yes, perfect, just perfect." My own phone vibrated in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. A new Instagram notification. I didn't even have to open it to know. Brenda had already posted. I clicked. There they were, the three of them, haloed in the warm light of the tree. The caption, "Feeling so incredibly blessed for this cozy family time before midnight mass, cherishing every single moment of God's grace." I looked down at my own snow-dampened work slacks and scuffed boots. I hadn't even been home for 60 seconds. I dumped my bags by the door and made a run for the kitchen. It was exactly as I had feared. It was exactly as I'd left it that morning. The raw chicken, still in its wrapper, sat in the fridge. The potatoes were still in a mesh bag on the counter. The bags of flour and sugar for the apple crumble were stacked, untouched. Brenda hadn't even done the smallest, most basic thing, not even preheated the oven. A hot surge of panic washed over me. We were supposed to leave for Mass at 11:30. Brenda expected a full, intimate family dinner before then. I ripped off my coat, threw my hair into the tightest, messiest bun I could manage, and scrubbed my hands at the sink as if I were scrubbing off the entire day. My life dissolved into a blur of frantic motion. I cranked the oven. I tore the chicken from its packaging, my cold fingers fumbling with the plastic, peeling potatoes, chopping rosemary, measuring flour. My sleeves were rolled up past my elbows. My face was hot, and within 20 minutes I could feel a layer of sweat gathering at my hairline. The kitchen, with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, felt like a pressure cooker. It was the frantic, unseen backstage of Brenda's perfect show. From the living room, the choir music soared. "Oh, holy night," I heard their laughter again, light and easy, Not one of them came in. Not to ask if I needed help, not to offer me a glass of water. Brenda did breeze in at one point. About an hour later, the chicken was finally in the oven, browning, and I was at the stove, mashing the potatoes with a fury that made my arm ache. "Oh my," she said, not to me, but to the room. Her phone was in her hand, held aloft. "It's beginning to smell heavenly, isn't it?" She drifted over to the stove and leaned over the pot of potatoes, aiming her phone camera. Click, click. "Just divine." She then opened the oven door, letting a blast of hot air hit my already flushed face, and took a picture of the roasting chicken. "Wonderful. Freya, keep it up. It all looks delicious." She turned to leave, then paused, her eyes narrowing at the counter. "Did you remember to use the organic rosemary? The one I bought specially?" "Yes, Brenda." "Good. It's the little details that matter." She swept out, leaving behind a cloud of her expensive, spicy perfume, which mingled sickeningly with the smell of garlic and onion. A few minutes later, the harmonious choir music was pierced by a different sound, a high-pitched, adolescent whine. "Moom, it's not right, it's not zipping. The seam is bunching up, and it looks awful." "What is it, Precious?" I heard Brenda's chair scrape back. "Don't pull at it. Chloe, you'll tear the velvet." The oven timer went off. The chicken needed basting, the potatoes needed the cream stirred in, and suddenly, Brenda was back in the kitchen doorway, but her attention was elsewhere. Her face was a mask of supreme annoyance. "Freya, I have to go upstairs. This ridiculous zipper on Chloe's dress is snagged, and she's having a full-blown meltdown. I have to go help her with her makeup and fix this disaster." She gestured vaguely at the oven. "I need you to just watch the oven for me. Make sure nothing burns. Baste that chicken. I'll be right back." "Brenda, I'm trying to start the crumble, and the potatoes." "Watch it," she snapped, the holy veneer cracking for just a second. "It's an emergency." She wasn't right back. She was gone for 40 minutes. 40 minutes where I was basting her chicken, stirring my potatoes, and frantically trying to peel and slice apples for the dessert. All while listening to the distant, muffled sounds of Chloe's sobs and Brenda's placating murmurs from the second floor. My father, presumably, had achieved invisibility. It was 8:15. Dinner was supposed to be at 7. The chicken was finally resting on the cutting board. The potatoes were in a serving bowl, but the crumble was still just a bowl of raw apples and a separate bowl of flour and butter. I looked at the clock. Then I looked down at myself. I was still in my work clothes, now splattered with grease. I smelled like a restaurant line cook. I hadn't showered. I hadn't changed. We were supposed to leave for Mass in 3 hours. I felt the panic rising, thick and choking. Brenda and Chloe finally descended the stairs, a vision of Christmas perfection. Chloe's velvet dress was now zipped, her makeup flawless. Brenda looked triumphant, like a general who had just won a difficult skirmish. "Well," she announced, walking into the kitchen. That crisis was averted. She immediately scanned the counters, and her face tightened. "Why isn't the dessert in the oven, Freya? We're supposed to be eating." My voice came out tight and thin. "Brenda, it's almost 8:30. I haven't even had time to get ready myself. The crumble takes an hour to bake, maybe. Maybe we should just skip dessert tonight? We have those cookies from the parish bake sale. If I start the crumble now, we'll be late for Mass." Brenda stared at me. Her face went utterly blank. "Skip dessert." She said the 2 words as if I had just suggested we burn the church down. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice dropping to a low, cold level. "This is a dinner, Freya. A full, proper dinner, not a snack bar." She gestured to the house. "The Mass is only 1 hour. This meal, this impression we make as a family that has its life together, that lasts, people talk. It shows we are grateful, that we are blessed. We are not skipping dessert." She pointed to the crumble. "Put it in the oven, and I'll need some of those sugar cookies from the parish tin, arranged on the silver platter, the one you polished." She wanted both. Of course she did. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest, but I choked it down. I just nodded, my hands shaking. I felt like I was juggling knives. I slammed the crumble into the oven. I grabbed the decorative tin of cookies. I was trying to arrange them on her special platter while simultaneously loading the first wave of greasy pots into the dishwasher. I was moving too fast. I smelled it before I saw it. Smoke, acrid and sharp. "What is that smell?" Brenda shrieked, sniffing the air. Are you burning something?" I turned. A thin gray curl of smoke was coming from the oven. The crumble? No. A forgotten tray. Oh God. The parish cookies. I had put them in on a baking sheet to warm them up for 5 minutes, just as she'd asked, and in the chaos of the crumble, I'd forgotten. I grabbed an oven mitt, yanked the door open, and a cloud of bitter smoke billowed out into the kitchen. The cookies weren't just brown, they were black, charred, smoking pucks of charcoal. "You've ruined them!" Brenda screamed. It was not a yell. It was a high-pitched, theatrical wail of despair. "You've ruined the parish cookies! Freya, what is wrong with you? I ask you to do one thing, one simple, beautiful dinner." "Brenda, what's going on?" My father finally appeared in the doorway, drawn by the smoke and the scream. He saw the smoking tray. He saw Brenda's face, and he immediately looked at me, not with concern, with deep, profound disappointment. "Freya, for God's sake, this night is important," he said, his voice heavy. "You know how much this means to your mother." "Your mother?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "You can't let her be embarrassed," he continued, completely blind to the situation. "You can't let anyone laugh at her." I didn't mean to," I stammered, flapping a dish towel at the smoke detector, my eyes stinging. "I was trying to do the crumble, and the dishes, and she just doesn't think, Carl!" Brenda was pacing now, her hands twisting together, the perfect hostess breaking apart. "She's careless. She's always been careless. She's ruining Christmas. She's ruining everything." I just stood there, holding a smoking tray of inedible cookies, smelling of garlic and sweat and failure, looking at my family. They were clean. They were dressed. They were ready for their holy night. And I was the help, the incompetent, careless help who had just failed her one simple task. I had been treading water for years, trying to keep my head up, trying to be good enough, and I had just run out of energy. I was done. Brenda took a deep, shuddering breath, visibly composing herself. She was back in director mode. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. "It's ruined. Forget the cookies. We will just have the crumble. But this kitchen is a disaster zone. We are not going to Mass and leaving this pigsty for me to clean up at 1 o'clock in the morning." She looked at me, her eyes as cold and hard as the ice on the roads. "We will eat dinner, and then you will stay here and clean. Every pot, every dish, every counter. When you are finished, if you finish in time, you can drive yourself to St. Gabriel's and meet us. You can sit in the back. Maybe that will give you time to reflect on your attitude." This was it, the checkmate. She would have her perfect dinner. She would get to Mass on time. She would perform her role as the blessed matriarch, and I would be left behind, punished, scrubbing her pots. The perfect setup. The Freya of yesterday, the Freya of 6 months ago, of my entire adult life, would have nodded. She would have whispered, "I'm sorry." She would have scrubbed the pots with tears of shame in her eyes. But the woman who had gotten that text from her grandfather, the woman who had been logging every single slight in a secret file on her laptop, that woman was done. I put the smoking cookie tray down on the stove. I didn't set it down. I dropped it. It made a loud metallic clang that echoed in the sudden silence. No, it was so quiet. I wasn't even sure I'd said it aloud, but I had. Brenda's head snapped toward me. "What did you just say?" My father looked terrified. "Freya, now is not the time." I said no. I repeated. My voice was stronger now. It didn't even tremble. I turned to face her, my whole body vibrating with an adrenaline I hadn't known I possessed. I cooked the entire meal. I prepped it, I served it, and I am not skipping midnight mass to clean your dishes. I am going to mass, at the same time as everyone else. I took a deep breath, the smoky air burning my lungs. I am not the help. I am not your servant. Brenda's face went from shock to a deep, mottled, blotchy red. It was a color I had never seen on her, a color that broke through her careful foundation. She looked, for a moment, truly ugly. She took 2 sharp steps toward me, until she was right in my personal space. She was taller than me by an inch, and she used it, looming. I could smell her expensive perfume and the acrid, chemical scent of her hairspray. She was shaking, not with sadness, not with disappointment. She was shaking with a rage so profound, so pure, it was almost silent. My father just stood there, a statue, paralyzed. When Brenda spoke, her voice wasn't a yell. It was a low, vicious whisper that was meant only for me. It was the sound of a queen whose pawn had just tried to take the king. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little bitch," she hissed, the words sharp and violent. "This is not the night. This is not the night for you to test my limits. You have no idea what you are playing with." Her voice, that low, vicious hiss, hung in the smoky air of the kitchen. "You have no idea what you are playing with." I should have been terrified. I was terrified. But the adrenaline that had been building for days, weeks, years, had finally crested. It wasn't a wave of panic. It was a strange, cold surge of absolute clarity. The fear was there, but for the first time, it was smaller than my anger. "I'm not playing with anything, Brenda," I said, and my voice was almost conversational. It was the calmest I'd felt all night. "I'm not a child, and I'm not your employee. I am going to shower. I am going to get dressed, and I'm going to midnight mass. I have a right to be there." "A right?" She spat the word. "You have the privilege of living in my home, a privilege you are about to lose. You will stay in this kitchen. You will clean this mess. That is final." "No." The sound of my voice, calm and defiant, finally did what the smell of smoke could not. It drew our audience. Chloe and my father appeared in the kitchen doorway. They had been hovering, listening to the raised voices, and had finally materialized. My father looked pained, his usual expression when caught between his wife and the rest of the world. Chloe just looked awkward. She was holding her phone, her thumb frozen over the screen, sensing a level of domestic discord that was far beyond her usual whining about zippers. My father raised his hands, a gesture of peacemaking. Now, ladies, it's Christmas Eve. Let's just, everyone take a deep breath. Brenda, Freya, we can sort this out after." "Stay out of this. Carl!" Brenda snapped at him, not even turning. Her eyes were locked on me, but I saw her register Chloe's presence. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. She was being seen. Her perfect pious mask was not just slipping, I was actively pulling it off. Her authority was being challenged in front of her daughter. The panic had to go somewhere. It metastasized, instantly, into righteous rage. "Do you hear her, Carl?" she suddenly cried, her voice breaking with a stunningly false wave of emotion. She turned, performing for them now. "Do you hear how she is speaking to me? In our home? On the night our Lord was born?" She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is trying to divide us. She has been trying to do this for years. She has always resented me. She resents you. Chloe, she resents our happiness." It was a brilliant performance. In 10 seconds, she had recast the entire scene. She was no longer the tyrant of the kitchen. She was the weeping matriarch, defending her home from a hostile intruder. You love this, don't you?" she sobbed, the tears welling up on command. "You love playing the victim, making me out to be the bad guy. After everything I have done for you, I gave you a roof. I gave you a family. I treated you like my own." She choked on the lie. "And you throw it all back in my face, all because of some burned cookies." My father was immediately hooked by her tears. "Freya," he said, his voice thick with disappointment, That's enough. Apologize to Brenda. You've upset her." "I am not apologizing," I said. The words felt foreign, powerful. The tears that usually flooded my eyes in these moments, the hot, frustrated tears of helplessness, were nowhere to be found. My eyes were completely dry. "This isn't about cookies," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. "This is about you using me. This is about you using me as your cook, your maid, and your chauffeur for the last 2 years. This is about you stealing money from my wallet." Brenda's fake sobs stopped, cut off as if by a switch. My father's face went pale. "I am not going to be your scapegoat," I said, my voice low and steady. "And I am not going to be your asset. I'm done." I looked past her, right at my father, who looked like he'd been struck. "I am going to call Grandpa Walter, and I'm going to tell him exactly what is happening in this house. I'm going to tell him what you're really like. I'm going to tell him everything." The name? Walter? It was as if I had detonated a bomb. Brenda's performance of the weeping mother vanished. It didn't fade. It shattered. The blotchy, mottled red I'd seen on her face before returned. But this time it was darker, closer to purple. She looked like she was choking. "You," she sputtered. "You will not." "He called me, Brenda. He's worried, and I'm going to tell him why he should be. You will not pull him to your side." Her voice was not a yell. It was a raw, animal scream, ripped from her throat, a sound I had never heard from a human being. And she moved. I saw it coming, but I couldn't process it. My brain simply could not accept that this was happening. Her hand, the one with her heavy, square-cut diamond wedding ring, swung up and back. The crack of the slap echoed in the small, sterile kitchen. It was louder than the clang of the cookie sheet. My head snapped to the side. A floral, sickening burst of white-hot pain exploded across my cheek. My ear, the left one, went suddenly, completely silent, replaced by a high-pitched, piercing. But she wasn't done. The slap was just the beginning. The rage had consumed her. "You will not destroy my family," she shrieked. Her face contorted into something I didn't recognize. And she shoved me. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a full-bodied, two-handed shove, aimed directly at my chest. I was already off balance, my brain still reeling from the impact of the slap. My vision blurred. My heels, the low, practical heels of my work boots, slid on the smooth ceramic tile. I stumbled backward. I had nowhere to go. My hip hit the edge of the kitchen island, a hard, bruising impact, but my momentum was too strong. My upper body lurched forward as my legs went back. My face, my chin, my mouth, it all slammed down onto the corner of the granite countertop. The impact was a sickening, hard thud. A shock of pain shot from my jaw straight up into my skull. I tasted it before I felt it. Salt and copper, hot and metallic. Blood. The strength in my legs vanished. I crumpled to the floor, landing hard on my knees, my hand flying to my mouth. The kitchen tile felt cold and slick. The world went silent for a second. The ringing in my ear was the only sound. I looked down at my hand. When I pulled my fingers away from my face, they were dark and wet in the bright, cheerful light of the kitchen. "Oh my God," my father whispered. I looked up from the floor. The scene was frozen, like a terrible photograph. Brenda was standing over me, her chest heaving, her knuckles white. She looked shocked at what she'd done, but the rage was still burning in her eyes. My father was by the doorway, his hand half raised, his face a mask of gray, abject horror. He had started to move forward, to intervene, but he had stopped. He was paralyzed. His mouth opened, and he said 2 words, his voice a reedy whisper. "Brenda, calm down." He said it to the room, not to her. His eyes darted from his wife, who was panting like a cornered animal, to me, on the floor, bleeding onto the grout. He was a rabbit caught between 2 wolves, and he chose, as he always chose, to freeze. He did not move another inch toward me. Chloe was behind him. Her face was paper white. Her phone was gone. Her hand clamped over her own mouth. Her eyes were wide with a genuine, unpracticed shock. This was not part of the script. This was real. She had seen her mother, her perfect, pious mother, draw blood. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Go to your room," Brenda shrieked, pointing a shaking finger up the stairs, diverting her panic onto the easiest target. "Now, Chloe, get out. This isn't your business." Chloe flinched as if she'd been struck herself. She looked at me one more time, her eyes filled with a terror I couldn't decipher, then turned and fled, her footsteps pounding up the carpeted stairs. I stayed on the floor for another second. My chin throbbed with a deep, pulsing ache. My lip felt split. The ringing in my ear was fading, replaced by the sound of Brenda's ragged breathing and my father's useless, shallow gasps. I was dizzy, but I was also calm. It was a terrible, profound, and final calm. Something had broken. It wasn't my jaw, though it felt like it might be. It was that last, stubborn, stupid thread of hope, the hope that I had clung to for a decade, the hope that if I was good enough, if I was quiet enough, if I was helpful enough, they would eventually see me, that my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, would eventually, finally, choose me. I looked at him standing there, still frozen, 10 feet away, staring at me bleeding on the floor, and I knew. He would never choose me. He had already made his choice, years ago. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even a person. I was a prop. I was a bargaining chip. And now, I was a liability. Using the cabinet handle, I pulled myself up. My legs were shaking, my knees screaming from the impact. I didn't look at either of them. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. I walked past my father, out of the kitchen. I could feel his eyes on me, but he didn't move. He didn't reach for me. He didn't say my name. I could hear Brenda behind me, her breathing still harsh and ragged. I walked to the front hall closet, leaving a small, dark drop of blood on the light oak floor. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed my purse. My laptop bag was still by the door where I'd dropped it, what felt like a lifetime ago. I grabbed that, too. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't work the zipper on my coat. I didn't bother. I just clutched it around me. My keys. My keys were in my purse. Good. I reached for the heavy brass knob of the front door. "If you walk out that door..." Brenda's voice came from the kitchen archway. It wasn't a shriek. It was a cold, hard, final judgment. She had regained her composure. "If you walk out of this house tonight, Freya Simmons, you are never coming back. Do you understand me? This family is done with you. You will have nothing. You will be nothing." I paused, my hand on the knob. The metal was cold. I could feel the blood dripping from my chin, warm, onto the collar of my shirt. I turned, just enough to look at her over my shoulder. She was standing there, her crimson sweater perfectly neat, her hair unruffled. She looked every inch the perfect Christian wife. My father stood a few feet behind her, a ghost in his own home, his face gray and empty. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say go to hell. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a second slap. It was biting, wet. The air felt thin in my lungs. I stumbled down the front steps, my boots slipping on the thin, fresh layer of snow that covered the walkway. I made it to the public sidewalk. Under the weak, yellow glow of the streetlight, I was trembling violently, not just from the cold, but from the shock. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was setting in. My chin was on fire. My lip was split open. Where could I go? A hotel? My car? I fumbled in my purse for my keys. Then I stopped. If you feel unsafe, step outside. I might be parked right near the front. My grandfather's text. He had meant the church, but this was my house. I wasn't at the church. I was just out. A car, parked 3 houses down. on the opposite side of the street, suddenly flashed its lights, not the headlights, the interior lights. It was a large, dark sedan, black, maybe a dark blue. The windows were tinted, but with the inside light on, I could just make out a silhouette in the driver's seat and one in the passenger seat, sitting upright. It was too far away to be a coincidence. My heart stopped. The passenger door of the dark car swung open. A gust of steam and warm air billowed out into the freezing night. And a voice cut through the silence. It was old, and it was rough, and it was the safest sound I had ever heard in my life. Freya? My grandfather, Walter Hayes. Freya? Are you hurt? Get in the car. Child. I stumbled across the icy street, my body moving on a strange, disconnected autopilot. The world had narrowed to the yellow streetlight, the falling snow, and the open door of that dark, warm car. I fumbled for the handle, my blood-slicked fingers slipping on the cold metal, and half fell, half climbed into the passenger seat. The door closed with a heavy, solid thunk, sealing out the world. The silence inside was immediate and absolute. It was a luxury car, smelling of clean leather and the faint, sweet scent of pipe tobacco. My grandfather, Walter Hayes, was not the frail, difficult recluse Brenda had painted. He was sitting perfectly upright, wearing a dark wool overcoat and a crisp scarf. His white hair was combed, and his eyes, when they met mine, were as sharp and clear as chips of ice. He was not the grandfather of my childhood. This was a man of substance, a man of authority. The man in the driver's seat was large and middle-aged, with a thick neck and a calm, professional face. He wore a simple black suit and tie. He didn't look like a driver. He looked like a bodyguard. "Child," Walter said, his voice rough. He didn't hug me. He didn't fuss. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pristine, white, folded handkerchief, pressing it into my hand. "Here, for your face." I took it, pressing the soft cotton to my mouth. It came away dark. "Mr. Lewis," my grandfather said, his voice quiet but commanding. "Turn up the interior lights, all of them." A series of soft lights clicked on, illuminating the cabin in a warm, bright glow. It felt like a stage. Walter leaned in, his face just a foot from mine. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking with a cold, assessing anger. His eyes tracked from the blooming purple bruise on my cheekbone, where the ring must have hit, down to my split lip and my chin, which was still bleeding sluggishly. "He just stood there," I whispered. It was the only thing I could think to say. He didn't do anything." Walter's jaw tightened. He leaned back, the assessment complete. He took a long, slow breath. Then he asked the question that shattered the last piece of my old life. "Do you want to report this to the police?" I stared at him. The question was so direct, so outside the realm of my reality. I couldn't process it. Police? For a family fight? The ingrained, decades-long training to protect the family, to keep the peace, to not make a fuss surged up, a reflex of pure shame. "No," I stammered, the word tasting like a lie. "No, I fell. It was an accident. I fell, and I hit the counter." My grandfather looked at me. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince me. He just let out a long, weary sigh, a sound of profound disappointment. "An accident," he repeated. His voice was flat. He turned to the center console and picked up a sleek, thin tablet. He tapped the screen, his movements deliberate. "You fell." He turned the tablet to face me. "Then you'd better watch this." It was a video feed. The angle was from across the street, high up, looking down at my front door and the walkway. It was nighttime, but the quality was shockingly clear, illuminated by the streetlight. "I had a discreet security camera installed on the lamppost over there 3 months ago," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Ostensibly for neighborhood safety. It has a remarkably sensitive directional microphone." He pressed play. I watched, horrified. As the video started, there was no image from inside the house. Of course, just the dark front door, but the audio was perfectly, horrifyingly clear. I heard my own voice, steady and cold. "No, I am not the help." I heard Brenda's hiss. "You listen to me, you ungrateful little bitch." I heard my own fateful words. "I am going to call Grandpa Walter, and I'm going to tell him exactly what is happening in this house." And then, the scream, Brenda's raw animal sound. "You will not pull him to your side." I flinched in the car seat as the sound of the slap, a sharp, ugly crack, echoed from the tablet's speakers. It was followed, a second later, by a sickening, heavy thud. A moment of silence, then, my father's voice, reedy and thin. "Brenda, calm down." My own hand, the one not holding the handkerchief, flew to my mouth. He'd heard it. My grandfather had heard everything. Walter let the recording play. He made me listen to Brenda's shriek at Chloe. He made me listen to the sound of my own footsteps, frantic on the wooden floor. He made me listen to Brenda's final, cold threat as I opened the door. "If you walk out of this house tonight, Freya Simmons, you are never coming back. You will be nothing." The video ended with the sound of the front door closing. I stared at the black screen, my own reflection, pale and bruised, staring back at me. She's been so worried about the mass," I whispered, my brain unable to connect the dots. "She's been worried about money." "Freya," Walter said, his voice like flint. He set the tablet down. "About 6 months ago, I received a phone call from your neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, the one at the end of the block. She's a nosy woman, thank God. She gardens all day. She told me she'd been watching you. She said she saw a young woman who looked just like my late daughter, Anne, doing all the yard work, hauling the garbage, carrying all the groceries, while Brenda Simmons sat on the front porch with her phone, directing traffic." He shook his head, his anger palpable. "That phone call, it concerned me. It confirmed a fear I'd had for years. So I did what I should have done a decade ago. I hired a private investigator, and I had my lawyers, start looking into things." He reached down to a thick black leather briefcase I hadn't noticed on the floor. He clicked it open and pulled out a folder. Not a thin one, a thick one. "Which brings us to this," he said. He handed me a bound document. I took it, my fingers trembling. The cover sheet read, "Trust Agreement and Deed of Property." I read the address. It was the house I had just run from. "This is Dad's house," I said, confused. "No, Freya." Walter's voice was quiet, but it cut through my shock. "It's my house. I bought that property. Cash. 25 years ago. When your mother was pregnant with you, she loved that street. She loved that old oak tree in the front yard." He let that sink in. My mother had chosen that house. "When she died," he continued, "and your father, in his grief, decided he needed to remarry. I was a fool. I was grieving, too. I wanted to believe he would protect you. I put the house into a revocable trust. I gave him and his new wife, Brenda, permission to live there, to use the property." He tapped the page in my hand. "But there was a condition. Turn to page 4, section 2B. I fumbled with the pages, the stiff paper sticking to the blood on my fingers. I found the section. It was highlighted. I read the legal jargon, and then the simple, clear sentence at its core. "This trust agreement is contingent upon the continued health, safety, and kind and loving treatment of my granddaughter, Freya Ann Simmons. Any documented act of abuse, neglect, cruelty, or financial exploitation, proven to my satisfaction, will render this agreement null and void, and all rights to the property will revert to Walter Hayes, effective immediately." I read it again and again. My brain, slow and thick from the trauma, finally understood. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't let Brenda sever the tie. He had built me a fortress, a legal fail-safe, and I had never even known it was there. This entire time, Brenda and my father weren't just being cruel. They were violating a contract that kept a roof over their heads. I trusted him, Walter said, his voice thick with a sudden, ancient anger that was far more terrifying than Brenda's. I trusted your father to be a man, to protect his own child. I let them feed me lies. For years. Freya's so busy with school. Freya's got a new boyfriend. She's a homebody. Dad, she doesn't want to visit. They isolated you. That is my failure, and I will live with it. He gestured to the dark house across the street. The letter you saw her with 2 years ago? That was from my lawyers. A gentle reminder of that clause. Just a, how are you? They must have thought it was a bluff. They thought I was just a senile old man in the country. So tonight, I didn't drive to the church. I came here. I told Mr. Lewis to park at 7. We've been sitting in this car for almost 2 hours. I came to see for myself. I saw you run in late. I saw the lights on in the kitchen. And then, I heard the truth. I heard what they did. And I saw my granddaughter run out of my house, bleeding. The dam broke. The shock. The pain. The terror. It was all eclipsed by one soul-shattering wave of pure, unadulterated relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't selfish. I was right. I bowed my head and I began to cry. Not the quiet, frustrated tears I cried in my bedroom. These were the deep, ragged, ugly sobs of a 28-year-old woman who was finally being believed. I cried into the clean white handkerchief, staining it with blood and mascara, my shoulders shaking. Walter didn't shush me. He just put one heavy, solid hand on my shoulder. It was the warmest I had felt in a decade. You are an adult, Freya, he said, his voice a low rumble. You have the right to say enough, and he nodded at the house, have just run out of time. He let me cry for another minute, and then his voice became all business. Now, here is what happens next. First, Mr. Lewis is going to drive us to the emergency room at Cedar Heights General. We are going to have a doctor look at that chin and that lip. We are going to get a medical report. We are going to take photographs. We are establishing a record. This is no longer a family spat. This is evidence. The driver, Mr. Lewis, spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and calm, and it came from all around me. He was looking at me in the rearview mirror. Ma'am, my name is Mr. Lewis. I've worked for Mr. Hayes for over 20 years. Your grandfather has a suite reserved for you at the downtown Hyatt. Or you are. Of course. Welcome at his home. You will not be going back to that house tonight. Or ever, unless you choose to. I just nodded. Numb. My sobs had subsided into shaky breaths. I was still processing the word evidence. Walter looked down at his briefcase again, as if remembering something. He reached in and pulled out one more document. It was thick, bound in a heavy blue legal cover. It was marked in gold lettering. Last Will and Testament of Walter Hayes. Draft. He didn't hand it to me. He just held it in his lap, tapping it with one finger. Brenda was right about one thing, he said, his voice laced with a contempt so cold it made me shiver. She was worried about my will. This was a new draft I had my lawyers draw up last month, before I was certain, when I was still hoping. He held it up. In this version, I was still trying to be fair. I was planning on leaving the house, the trust, and a substantial portion of my estate to your father, Carl, on the one condition that he and Brenda provided you with lifelong care and familial love. He looked at the document, then he looked at my face, bruised and bleeding in the bright interior light. He let out a short, bitter scoff. Lifelong care. With a sudden, violent motion, he tore the thick document in half. The sound of the ripping paper was loud, like a scream in the quiet car. He tore the two halves again, and again. He didn't stop until it was just a pile of confetti-sized blue and white scraps in his lap. I suspect, he said, calmly brushing the pieces of his will from his hands onto the floor mat, that this version will never be signed, not in the way they hoped. He turned to his driver. Mr. Lewis, the hospital, now. The emergency room at Cedar Heights General was an island of harsh, fluorescent reality in the middle of a holy night. It was quiet, the way ERs only are on major holidays. A tense, humming silence punctuated by coughs and the squeak of rubber soles. Mr. Lewis handled the intake, his voice a low, calm rumble, while Walter stood beside me, a silent, unmovable presence. I felt like an imposter. The people in the waiting room had gunshot wounds, hacking coughs, the visible frailties of age. I just had a family problem. I pulled the collar of my coat tighter, trying to hide my face, feeling the hot throb of shame. A young, tired-looking doctor finally called my name. He led me into a curtained bay, his eyes kind but exhausted. "Okay, Ms. Simmons, what's going on tonight?" Walter started to speak, but I cut him off. The lie was automatic, a reflex trained by years of protecting them. "I fell," I whispered, the word thick and strange through my swollen lip. "I was in the kitchen. I slipped and hit my face on the counter." The doctor just nodded, his face impassive. He gently prodded my jaw, his fingers cool. "Okay, I'm just going to take a look." He shined a bright, invasive light into my eyes, then at my cheek, then my chin. He gently pulled down my lower lip, and I hissed in pain. "Right," he said, stepping back. He didn't sound convinced. He sounded clinical. "Well, the good news is, I don't believe anything is fractured. Your jaw is intact, but you do have significant soft tissue damage." He began dictating, his voice a monotone, as if for a recording. "Patient presence with a deep contusion on the right zygomatic arch, consistent with a strike from a ring or fist. There is a 2-centimeter full-thickness laceration to the lower lip, which will require stitches. She also has a severe impact bruise on the chin, consistent with a secondary impact. Patient states she fell." He turned back to me, his eyes softening just a fraction. "The bruise on your cheek and the cut on your lip. They present as two very separate points of impact. Ms. Simmons, are you sure you fell?" I looked at Walter, who was watching the doctor with a hawk-like intensity. I couldn't hold the lie. I just shook my head, my eyes flooding with tears. "No," I whispered. "Was anyone else involved?" My stepmother." "Were there any children present? Were any children harmed?" "No," I said, my voice cracking. "No, only adults." "Okay," he nodded, making a note on his chart. "I'm going to document this as an adult family dispute. I'm going to give you 3 stitches in that lip and get you an ice pack." He was quick, professional. He stitched my lip with a practiced hand, the needle pulling, but the anesthetic numbing the worst of it. He handed me a sheaf of papers, aftercare instructions, a receipt, a documented, official record of what she had done. We were back in the car 20 minutes later. The silence was even heavier now. The stitches felt tight, foreign. My whole face throbbed with a low, pulsing ache. Mr. Lewis sat in the driver's seat, the engine humming quietly. Walter turned to me in the darkness. "You have the medical report. Freya, you have the audio from the camera. They are damning. She has no idea we have either. You are safe. You are with me." He paused, and his voice was gentle, but firm. "Now is the time to decide. You can go to the hotel Mr. Lewis has booked. We can let this go. You can let her win, or you can file a report for what she did." I flinched. The police, the shame from the ER surged back, tenfold. All of Brenda's accusations, selfish, ungrateful, ruining the family, causing trouble. Calling the police felt like the ultimate act of betrayal, the final, unforgivable sin. It was making a scene. I can't," I whispered, shame washing over me. It's Christmas Eve. She's my father's wife. It would destroy him. It would destroy everything." "What everything, Freya?" Walter's voice was sharp, not cruel. "What is left to destroy? The illusion? The lie that you were a happy family? She assaulted you. She drew blood. She did it because she believed you were alone and weak, and that you would take it, just like you've always taken it. She did it because your father let her." I had no answer. I just looked away, out the dark window, at my own distorted reflection. And I saw it. In the faint light from a distant streetlight, I saw my face. It wasn't me. It was a stranger. The right side of my face was swollen, puffy. My cheek was already darkening from purple to a sick, deep blue. My mouth was grotesque, my lower lip unnaturally full, puckered around the dark lines of the new stitches. This wasn't a spat. This wasn't a disagreement. This wasn't being dramatic. This was the face of an assault victim. She had been willing to do this to me, to my face, to protect her money and her reputation. All my father's inaction, all Brenda's years of psychological battery, all the unpaid labor, all the stolen birthdays. It all coalesced into this one, throbbing, undeniable physical proof. My anger, cold and slow, finally burned through the shame. "She hit me," I said, my voice a thick murmur. "She hit me, and he watched. He watched." I turned back to my grandfather. The tears were gone. My eyes felt as cold and clear as his. "I'll call," I said. "What's the number?" He didn't smile. He just nodded, as if I'd finally given the correct answer to a long and painful test. He handed me his own phone. "Use this. It's secure. Call the non-emergency line for the Cedar Heights Police. Tell them you are an adult victim of domestic battery and you wish to file a report." My fingers were steady as I dialed. A dispatcher answered, her voice bored. "Cedar Heights Police, how can I help you?" "My name is Freya Simmons," I said, my voice thick and strange from the stitches, but it didn't waver. "I need to report an adult domestic battery. I was assaulted tonight by my stepmother, Brenda Simmons." The dispatcher's tone clicked instantly from bored to professional. "Are you in a safe location, ma'am?" "Yes, I am with my grandfather. I am not at the house." "Where is the assailant now?" I looked at the dashboard clock. 10:30. I believe she is at church, at St. Gabriel's Chapel on Crestview Drive, for midnight mass." There was a pause. "St. Gabriel's. Okay, ma'am. We have 2 officers finishing a call just a few blocks from that location. Given the circumstances, they can meet you there to take your statement. It's a public, well-lit area. Can you meet them at that location in, say, 15 minutes? My stomach dropped. "At the church? Yes, I can." "Okay, ask for Officer Riley. They'll be waiting." I hung up and relayed the information. My whole body was vibrating. They're meeting us at the church." "Good," Walter said. He tapped Mr. Lewis on the shoulder. "Mr. Lewis, St. Gabriel's, but not the main lot. Park across the street, in the office building lot. We want a clear view." "Grandpa," I said, my voice small again. I can't go in there. Not like this. All those people. Father Michael. They all love her. They'll look at me. They'll look at my face. And they'll still take her side." Walter put his hand on my arm. His grip was firm. "You don't have to set one foot inside that building, child. You don't have to speak to a single one of them. You and I will wait in this car. The police will handle this. We are not there to plead our case to a congregation. We are there to give a statement to the law. All you have to do is stand by me and let them see the truth. Let them see what she did. That's all. Let them do their job." Mr. Lewis put the car in gear, and we pulled away from the hospital, gliding silently through the snowy, empty streets. The drive was only 10 minutes. As we got closer, the atmosphere changed. The streets were no longer empty. We passed families, bundled in coats and scarves, walking on the sidewalks, their faces bright, laughing as they headed for the church. I saw groups of teenagers, parents holding the hands of small, excited children. All of them, walking into the warm glow of St. Gabriel's, into Brenda's orbit. The hypocrisy of it all, the lie, was so profound it made me nauseous. She was in there, right now, singing carols, her hands clasped in prayer, the picture of Christian virtue, while my lip was stitched together and my cheek was turning black. "Mr. Lewis parked, just as Walter had instructed. We were in the shadows of a low, dark office building, across the 4-lane street from the church, but we had a perfect, unobstructed view of the front doors. The church was beautiful, a heavy, old stone building, its stained glass windows glowing like jewels from within. The sound of the organ was a faint, deep rumble, even from here. I looked at the clock, 10:48. A few minutes later, a large white SUV I knew well pulled into the church's main lot. My heart hammered against my ribs. Brenda, Carl, and Chloe got out. From this distance, they were perfect. Brenda, in a long, elegant crimson wool coat. Chloe, in her dark velvet, looking like a porcelain doll. My father, in his best dark suit, looking stoic and respectable. They weren't laughing now. They were composed. They were the picture of the perfect, devout family, arriving just in time for the carols. I watched them. Brenda stopped to kiss an older woman on the cheek. My father shook hands with an usher. They were performing. They glided through the doors, a single, impenetrable unit, leaving no trace of the smoke, the blood, or the violence. They had just erased it. She's just acting, I whispered, horrified. It's like it never happened. Of course she is, Walter said, his voice a low growl. It's the only thing she knows how to do. A moment later, 2 Cedar Heights police cruisers, their lights off, slid into the church parking lot. They didn't park near the entrance. They took spaces near the road, visible but discreet. My phone buzzed, Walter's phone. Ms. Simmons? This is Officer Riley. We're on site, in the main lot. We'll wait until the service concludes. We don't want to disrupt the mass. We'll meet you by the main entrance doors as people are exiting. Okay, I managed to say. I'm across the street. I see you. I'll be there. Walter nodded, satisfied. Good. Now we wait. And we did. For over an hour, we sat in the dark, warm car, a silent, strange vigil. We listened to the distant, muffled sound of hymns. O holy night. Silent night. My face throbbed in time with the bass of the organ. I felt suspended, caught between my old life and whatever this was. I was terrified. But for the first time in my adult life, I also felt strangely, profoundly safe. At 5 minutes past midnight, the heavy oak doors swung open. The sound of joy to the world and the warm, loud chatter of hundreds of people spilled out into the freezing night air. Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Father! They're coming out, I whispered. Stay here, Walter said. He and I watched. The 2 police officers, a man and a woman, got out of their cruiser and walked slowly to the bottom of the main steps, standing respectfully to the side as the first wave of people came out. And then I saw her. Brenda. She was in the center of the crowd, radiant. She was shaking Father Michael's hand, her face a mask of beatific joy. A beautiful service, Father, just so moving. God bless you. Carl was beside her, his face weary but composed. Chloe was a step behind, already buried in her phone. The 2 officers stepped forward, directly into their path. Mrs. Brenda Simmons? The male officer, Officer Riley, asked. His voice was calm, professional, but loud enough to make the small cluster of people around them pause. Brenda's holy smile faltered. She looked confused, annoyed at the interruption. Yes, can I help you? Officers? Merry Christmas. Ma'am, I'm Officer Riley. This is Officer Duvall. We need to speak with you and your husband for a moment. We've received a report tonight. He glanced at his notebook. A report of domestic battery. The air around them seemed to freeze. The people nearby stopped talking. Father Michael's hand, which had been patting Brenda's, froze in midair. Brenda's face cycled through a series of emotions. First, pure, baffled confusion. Domestic? Battery? She let out a high, brittle laugh. Officer, I'm afraid there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We just came from Mass, my family and I. She gestured to Carl and Chloe, to the church, as if they were her alibi. The officer did not smile. We received a call from an adult victim, ma'am, who states that you physically assaulted her in your home, just about 2 hours ago. Brenda's performance kicked in. She put a hand to her chest, her eyes wide with hurt. Assaulted? Me? Officer, I am a pillar of this community. She looked at Father Michael for support. I would never... Who? Who would possibly say such a vicious, hateful thing? On Christmas Eve? Of all nights? The crowd was definitely watching now, a semicircle of curious, whispering parishioners. Officer Riley didn't look at his notepad. He didn't engage with her performance. He just looked at her, his face impassive. Then he lifted one hand and pointed. He pointed, past the crowd, past the parking lot, directly across the street, into the shadows where we sat. She would, ma'am, he said, his voice carrying in the cold, clear air. Your stepdaughter, Freya Simmons. Walter's hand was on the door handle. Now, child, get out of the car. Go stand in the light. Mr. Lewis flicked the car's high beams. 2 powerful, white-hot beams of light shot across the street, flooding the church's entrance, illuminating the officers, the crowd, and Brenda's horrified face. I opened my door and stepped out. I walked into the light, my laptop bag in one hand, my bloody handkerchief in the other. Walter got out on his side, his dark wool coat making him look a decade younger, and stood right beside me. Brenda turned. She followed the officer's pointed finger. She squinted into the sudden, blinding glare. And she saw me. She saw me, standing 20 feet away, not a whimpering girl in a kitchen, but a woman bathed in light. She saw the dark, imposing figure of my grandfather standing next to me, a man she thought was a frail, distant recluse. And in that harsh, unforgiving, theatrical glare, she saw, clear as day, what she had done. She saw the grotesque, swollen, purple bruise covering the right side of my face. She saw the glint of the stitches in my split lip. She saw the dark, dried blood on the collar of my shirt. Her face, which had been a mask of holy victimhood, just collapsed. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her bright red lipstick looking like a wound. Her mouth fell open. The performance was over. The lie was dead. It was not shock. It was not confusion. It was the raw, silent, primal panic of a creature that has just been, finally, and irrevocably, caught. The high beams from my grandfather's car cut a tunnel of harsh, white light through the parking lot, turning the falling snow into a blizzard of silver. It was a stage, and we were the actors. Suddenly, terribly illuminated. The chatter and laughter from the exiting congregation died instantly, replaced by a wave of confused, hushed whispers. Brenda, my father, and Father Michael were frozen at the bottom of the steps. A perfect tableau of piety interrupted. Officer Riley and his partner, Officer Duvall, didn't wait. They walked with a calm, deliberate pace, their boots crunching on the salted pavement, crossing the street directly toward us. They walked past the parishioners, past my father, and stopped 3 feet in front of me and my grandfather. The entire parking lot was holding its breath. "You're Freya Simmons?" Officer Riley asked. He was looking at my face, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes were taking in the stitches, the swelling, the dark, ugly bruise. "Yes," I said, my voice thick. "And this is your grandfather, Walter Hayes?" "I am," Walter said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you for meeting us, ma'am," the officer continued, as if we were in a quiet office and not the center of 100 staring eyes. "I know this is a difficult situation. I need you to just, in your own words, tell me what happened tonight that led to your injuries." I looked past him. Brenda was watching, her face a mask of white, stunned horror. My father looked like he was going to be sick, his hand gripping Chloe's arm. I took a breath, the freezing air stinging my lungs. I could feel the solid, steady presence of my grandfather next to me. "We were in the kitchen," I started, my voice surprisingly steady. My stepmother, Brenda, she wanted me to cook a full dinner right before Mass. I was late from work. I was doing it all. And I burned some cookies." A few parishioners shifted. I could hear a woman whisper, "Burned cookies?" "She was angry," I continued, my eyes finding Brenda's in the crowd. "She told me I would have to stay home from Mass to clean the entire kitchen. I told her no. I told her I was 28 years old, and I wasn't her servant, and that I had a right to go to church." The whispers grew louder. I told her I couldn't take being used anymore, and I told her I was going to call my grandfather. I was going to tell him what was happening in this house. "And what happened then, Freya?" Officer Riley prompted, his pen hovering over his notepad. I looked at my split lip. I could taste the faint, metallic tang of blood and antiseptic. She screamed at me not to, and then she slapped me, hard, across this side of my face. I pointed to the swollen bruise, with her ring, and then she shoved me. She pushed me with both hands, as hard as she could. I fell backward and I hit my face, my chin and my mouth, on the corner of the granite countertop. That's how this happened. I made myself clear. This wasn't a child. There were no children harmed. This was her, assaulting me, an adult. A collective, horrified gasp rose from the crowd. Father Michael looked like he'd been struck. Brenda finally found her voice. The shock broke, and the performer, the victim, rushed onto the stage. "No!" she shrieked, the sound tearing through the parking lot. She lunged forward, but my father instinctively grabbed her arm. She began to sob, the most theatrical, heart-wrenching sobs I had ever heard. No, that's a lie. Officer, she's lying." She appealed to the crowd, her hand to her heart. She's troubled. She's always been a very dramatic, emotional girl. She fell. I told her the floor was wet. She was hysterical because she burned the cookies. She was rushing, and she slipped. I tried to catch her." She turned her tear-streaked, pleading face to me, her voice dripping with a poisonous public sorrow. "Freya, how? How could you do this? How could you tell such a monstrous, vicious lie? To me? On Christmas? In front of our church? I love you. I have only ever loved you." It was a brilliant, stunning performance. I felt the eyes of the crowd shift. I saw the doubt in their faces. They had known this woman, Saint Brenda. For a decade, they had known me only as her quiet, sullen shadow. I could feel my resolve, my anger, begin to waver. The shame was so heavy, so hot. It was hard to breathe. I was the one who was bleeding, yet I was the one on trial. I started to tremble. I looked down, unable to meet their judging stares. And then, Walter's heavy hand landed on my shoulder. His grip was like an anchor. "Look up, child," he murmured, his voice for my ears only, "and tell the truth, nothing more, nothing less." I lifted my chin, the stitches pulling, the pain grounding me. I looked at Brenda's weeping, lying face, and I was done being her victim. Officer Duvall, the female officer, stepped forward. She wasn't looking at Brenda. She was looking at my father and at Chloe, who was hiding behind him. "Sir," she asked my father, "were you and your daughter present during this fall?" My father's face was a terrible, ashen gray. He looked from his weeping wife to the police officer, to me. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, clicking sound came out. "He was there," I said, my voice cutting through Brenda's sobs. "He was in the doorway. He saw it." Then I turned and looked at the girl who was hiding. And she saw it. Chloe saw the whole thing. Ask her. Ask her if I fell. Ask her if her mother tried to catch me. Every eye in the parking lot, the police, my father, Brenda, the parishioners, swiveled to the 16-year-old girl. Chloe was trapped in the center of the nightmare. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror I recognized. Then she looked at her mother, who had stopped sobbing and was now staring at her. Her expression one of desperate, silent command. Lie for me. Chloe's face crumpled. It wasn't a performance. It was the real, terrified collapse of a child forced to choose. She started to cry. A real, hiccuping sob. I, she stammered, looking at the ground. Mom, just stop. I don't. It wasn't a confirmation, but it was not a denial. And in the silence of the parking lot, it was as loud as a gunshot. She's just a child. You're bullying her, Brenda shrieked, trying to regain control. You're all attacking my family. Officers, my grandfather's voice boomed, silencing her. He did not raise it, but it had a weight that hers lacked. He stepped forward, out of the high beams, pulling his tablet from his overcoat pocket. My granddaughter's face is a compelling witness, and Chloe's silence is another. But if you are still unclear on what exactly happened in that kitchen, I believe this will clarify what falling sounds like. He held the tablet in one hand. He pressed play. My own voice, cold and steady. No, I am not the help. Brenda's vicious hiss. You listen to me, you ungrateful little bitch. My own voice, clear and strong. I am going to call Grandpa Walter. And then, the sound that had echoed in my head, Brenda's raw, guttural, inhuman scream. You will not pull him to your side! It blasted from the tablet's speakers, a sound of pure demonic rage. It echoed off the stone walls of the church. The crowd flinched as one. It was followed, a half-second later, by the sharp, ugly crack of the slap. And then, the horrible, heavy, final thud of my body hitting the counter. A collective, horrified, "Oh my God," rose from the parishioners. Father Michael instinctively crossed himself, his face pale with shock. In the dead silence that followed, Walter pressed, "Stop." He looked at Officer Riley. That recording, along with the footage of my granddaughter exiting the house with blood on her face, is at your disposal. Brenda was frozen. The lie was dead. Her social standing, her entire identity, had been executed in 30 seconds of audio. She had been heard, not as Saint Brenda, but as the monster she was. She did the only thing she could. She turned on the weakest person there. You, she shrieked, her voice now just a hoarse, ragged cry of pure, undiluted spite. She pointed a shaking finger at my father. You just stood there. You let her provoke me. You let this happen. You never stand up for me. Carl, this is your fault. Ma'am, Officer Riley said, stepping forward, his voice final. That is enough. He turned, and for the first time, he addressed Brenda with the cold, official voice of the law. Mrs. Brenda Simmons, we have a medical report documenting the victim's injuries. We have this audio recording. We have an eyewitness who is unable to deny the events. You have the right to remain silent. We are taking you to the station to be processed and to give a formal statement on the charge of domestic battery. Processed? She whispered, the word hollow. A charge? No, you can't. It's Christmas. It was a family matter. It stopped being a family matter when you assaulted her, ma'am. Officer Duval said, her voice quiet but firm. Please, come with us. As they gently but firmly took her by the arms, the reality of it hit her, the humiliation, in front of her church, in front of everyone. The mask of the matriarch was gone, and all that was left was the raw, narcissistic wound. She went limp, collapsing into a heap of pure, wailing despair. No, please, Carl, do something, she sobbed, trying to cling to him. Chloe, baby, don't let them take me. Don't let her do this to me. She tried to reach for Chloe, a final, desperate play for the image of the loving mother, but Chloe just stumbled backward, away from her, terrified. Officer Duval looked at my father. Sir, it would be best if you took your daughter home. We will be in contact. My father, his face gray and slack, looked like a man who had died and was still walking. He just nodded, dumbly. He grabbed Chloe's arm, who was sobbing hysterically, and began to pull her, stumbling, toward their car. He stopped, just once. He turned, and he looked at me. His eyes were not sad. They were not apologetic. They were filled with a burning, helpless, pathetic hatred. He looked at me as if I had been the one to stand by and do nothing. "Are you happy now, Freya?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a venom I had never heard from him. "You know what you've done? You've destroyed this family." The stitches in my lip pulled, the pain a sharp, grounding reminder of whose hand had struck the first blow. I looked at the man who was my father, the man who had traded his daughter for a quiet life, the man who had just lost everything because he had protected nothing. "I just told the truth, Dad," I said, my voice thick but clear. "I wasn't the one who threw the first punch in this story." He flinched, as if I had, in fact, slapped him. He had no answer. He just turned, a broken, empty man, and all but dragged his weeping stepdaughter into the darkness. I stood with my grandfather. The high beams now clicked off, the parking lot illuminated only by the silent, flashing red and blue lights of the police cruiser. I breathed in the cold, clean, midnight air. It tasted like freedom. I watched as Officer Riley put Brenda into the back of the car. The door shut with a heavy, final click. Through the back glass, I saw her face. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just sitting there, her perfect crimson coat bunched around her. She was staring at me, and at Walter, who had just placed a heavy protective hand on my shoulder. She was staring at the girl she thought was weak, the girl she thought was worthless, the girl she thought would never, ever fight back. And in her eyes, I saw, for the first time, not anger, not hatred, just pure, unadulterated fear. Christmas Day was a blur. I spent it in a quiet, sterile room at the downtown Hyatt, my grandfather in a chair by the window, Mr. Lewis just outside the door. I slept for 14 hours, a deep, heavy, exhausted sleep. The day after, December 26th, was when the new world began. Brenda had been released from the holding cell on Christmas morning, a fact Walter learned from his lawyer before I even woke up. She was charged with misdemeanor domestic battery, a charge that, while not a felony, was a permanent public stain on her sacred reputation. But more immediately, a judge had issued an emergency, temporary restraining order. She was not allowed within 100 yards of me. She could not contact me, my grandfather, or my place of work. She was, by force of law, muzzled. On the morning of the 27th, Mr. Lewis drove us from the hotel not to my grandfather's country home, but to a tall, glass and steel building in the city's financial district. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and silent, expensive-looking art. The elevator was so smooth and quiet, it felt like we weren't moving at all. We stepped out onto the 32nd floor. The plaque on the wall read, "Hayes and Alder, Attorneys at Law." This was not some small-town legal office. This was a place of serious, generational power. This was my grandfather's world, the world Brenda had tried, and failed, to inherit. We were ushered into a massive corner conference room. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the entire city, blanketed in snow, the bright winter sun glinting off the buildings. A woman in a severe, perfectly tailored suit stood to greet us. She looked to be in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a shark-like smile that didn't quite reach them. "Walter, it's good to see you, though I wish the circumstances were better." Her voice was crisp. "Margaret, thank you for meeting us on such short notice," Walter said, shaking her hand. He gestured to me. "This is my granddaughter, Freya." Margaret Alder looked at me. Her sharp eyes softened, just a fraction, as she took in my face. The swelling had gone down, but the bruise had ripened into a truly spectacular, ugly, yellowish-purple bloom that covered my entire cheek. The black stitches in my lip were stark. I was a walking, breathing piece of evidence. "Ms. Simmons," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "It is a pleasure. Please, sit. Can we get you coffee? Water?" I just shook my head, my throat too tight to speak, and sat at the impossibly long, polished mahogany table. "Freya," Margaret began, sitting opposite me, her hands clasped. "Your grandfather has retained me and my firm to represent your interests. All of them. I've reviewed the medical report from Cedar Heights General. I've listened to the audio recording. I've seen the security footage. And I have reviewed the trust agreement your grandfather established in 1995. She leaned forward. "So, let's talk about your options. First, the restraining order. It's temporary. I strongly advise we petition the court for a permanent order of protection. Based on the evidence, it will be granted. That means Brenda Simmons will be legally barred from approaching or contacting you. Permanently." I swallowed. Permanently. "Second, the criminal charge," she continued, ticking points off on her fingers. "She will likely be offered a plea. Anger management, probation. You will have a say in that. We can push for the maximum, or we can use it as leverage." "Leverage?" I asked, my voice a croak. "Leverage," she affirmed. "For the third, and most significant, matter, the house." She slid a familiar-looking document across the table. The trust agreement I had seen in the car. "This is not a matter of family feelings. Freya, this is a contract, a simple one. Walter provided your father and his wife with a multi-million-dollar asset, rent-free, for over 2 decades. In exchange, they had just one, fiduciary responsibility: to ensure your kind and loving treatment. On Christmas Eve, Brenda, in the presence of your father, who failed to intervene, violently breached that contract. The agreement is void." I just stared at her. It all sounded so huge, so cold, so final. This wasn't a family fight. It was a breach of contract, a voided agreement. I don't, I stammered, looking at my grandfather. "It all feels so big, so aggressive. I just wanted her to stop." Walter put his hand over mine on the table. "Child, listen to me," he said, his voice quiet. "You didn't make this big. She did. She did this when she chose to put her hands on you. She did this when she and your father plotted to steal an inheritance. She did this when she gambled that I was a weak old fool and that you were a silent victim. She made a business decision, and she lost." His words, "a business decision," hit me. He was right. That's all it had ever been for her. "We have," Margaret said, "taken the liberty of scheduling a meeting for this afternoon, here, at 2:00. "A meeting? With who?" "With your father," she said. "We sent a formal request to him this morning, informing him that we needed to discuss the immediate disposition of the property on Crestview Drive. He will be here. His wife, due to the restraining order, cannot be." For the first time, Carl would have to face the music alone. At 2:00 sharp, my father was shown into the conference room. He looked terrible. He was still wearing the same suit from midnight mass, now rumpled and stained. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red-rimmed, his skin a pasty gray. He looked, I realized, like a man who hadn't slept in 2 days. He looked haunted. He saw me, and he flinched. He visibly recoiled from the sight of my bruised face, his eyes skittering away, unable to meet mine. Then he saw Walter, sitting at the head of the table like a king, and his expression crumpled from fear into a kind of weak, desperate anger. "Dad," he said, his voice hoarse. "What is this? What are you doing? Lawyers? You had her arrested." "Sit down, Carl," Walter said. His voice was not angry. It was cold. It was the voice of a man ending a business relationship. Carl sat, stiffly, at the far end of the long table, a prisoner at his own parole hearing. Margaret Alder took the floor. "Mr. Simmons, thank you for coming. We will make this brief. We are here to discuss the property at 2416 Crestview Drive. As you are aware, that property is held in a revocable trust established by my client, Mr. Hayes." It's our house," Carl stammered. "Brenda and we have equity. We've lived there for—" "You have lived there as tenants at will." "Carl." Margaret cut him off, her voice like ice. "You have paid no rent. You have paid no mortgage. You have paid property taxes, as stipulated. You have no equity. You have only the privilege of use, a privilege that was contingent on one single clause." She slid the document down the table. Section 2B, the kind and loving treatment of Freya Simmons, a clause which, on the night of December 24th, was irrevocably breached by your wife, Brenda Simmons, resulting in documented physical injury, an assault which you witnessed and which you failed to stop. As such, the trust is void. My client is reclaiming the property. My father's pale face went completely white. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. "Reclaiming?" he whispered. You're evicting us? From our home? It's Christmas." "You and your wife had 30 days from the moment of breach to vacate the premises," Margaret continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "However, given the circumstances of the assault and the active restraining order, we are accelerating the timeline. You will have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings. Mr. Lewis will be on site to supervise." 72 hours? He choked out. That's insane. Brenda, where are we supposed to go? "Frankly, Carl, I don't give a damn." Walter spoke, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I gave you a home. I gave you my trust. I gave you my daughter's only child. And you stood by, you spineless coward, and you watched your wife beat her." He stood up, his presence filling the room. "I was silent for too long. I hoped, against all evidence, that you would be a father, that you would protect her as you should have. I hoped that Brenda, for all her greed, would at least be kind. Christmas Eve proved me wrong. It proved that you are both bankrupt." My father just stared at him, his mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. Margaret Alder reached into her briefcase and pulled out a document. It was the thick, blue-bound will, the one Walter had torn up in the car. It was a perfect new copy. "This," she said, "was a draft of a new will your father-in-law was considering. We had it drawn up last month." She slid it across the table to Carl. His eyes, desperate, immediately went to it. He fumbled it open. I saw his gaze scan the pages, saw the flicker of comprehension. He was seeing the clause, the one that gave him and Brenda everything. He was seeing the inheritance he had almost had. "In this version," Margaret said, her voice cold, "Mr. Hayes intended to bequeath the house and the majority of his liquid assets to you and your wife, contingent on your lifelong care of Freya. A generous offer, all things considered." My father's face was a terrible mix of emotions. He was looking at the life he had just lost. And then, Margaret Alder reached out, took the will from his trembling hands, and with a slow, deliberate, theatrical motion, she tore it in half. "Rip." The sound was shockingly loud in the silent, sunlit room. She tore it again, and again. She did not stop until, just as Walter had done, it was a pile of useless blue and white scraps on the polished mahogany. "That offer," she said, "is rescinded." She then placed a second, much thinner document on the table. "This is the new, finalized will, which Mr. Hayes will be signing this afternoon. In it, the Crestview property and the majority of the estate are left directly to his granddaughter, Freya. The remainder will establish a charitable foundation, in her mother's name, dedicated to supporting adult victims of domestic abuse." Carl made a sound, a low, wounded animal noise in the back of his throat. He looked at Walter, his eyes finally, desperately, pleading. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, please. It was a misunderstanding. It was a terrible night. Brenda, she was under so much stress. The mass, the cookies. She snapped. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can apologize." "Apologize?" Walter said, his voice deceptively soft. "That's an interesting word. Carl, I don't recall hearing it on Christmas Eve. I don't recall you saying it to Freya as she was bleeding on your kitchen floor." "It's not a misunderstanding when you leave stitches. Carl," Walter boomed. "And fixing this does not begin with excuses. It does not begin with blaming the victim for provoking her abuser. It begins with accountability, and that is a word you and your wife do not seem to understand." My father turned his desperate, pleading eyes to me. The last link, the last person who might, out of some old, stupid loyalty, save him. "Freya," he choked out. "Honey, please, don't let him do this. This is our house. Your room is there. Your mother's things. Please, I'm your father." My heart ached. It was a physical, dull, tearing pain. This was my dad, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man whose approval I had craved every single day of my life, and he was, finally, broken. But he still hadn't said it. "I don't want you to lose everything, Dad," I said, my voice thick with stitches and a grief so profound it stole my breath. I never wanted any of this." His face lit up with a small, desperate flicker of hope. "Then stop it, Freya. Tell him to stop. We can go back. We can—" "No," I said, and the hope died in his eyes. "We can't go back. I can't go back to that kitchen. I can't go back to being your maid. I can't go back to being nothing." I looked at him, my heart breaking for the man he should have been. "I don't want you to be homeless, but I need you. Just once. I need you to admit what happened. I need you to admit that what she did, and what you let her do, was wrong. You need to say you're sorry. Not for the misunderstanding. For that." I pointed to my bruised face. This was it, his final test. All he had to do was say it. "I'm sorry. Freya, it was wrong." He looked at my face. He looked at Walter. He looked at Margaret. He looked at the torn scraps of paper that had been his future. His mouth worked. He opened it, and a small, strangled sound came out, but the words "I'm sorry" would not come. He couldn't say them, because to say them would be to admit his failure, to admit his weakness, to admit that the perfect family he had built with Brenda was a catastrophic, violent lie. He couldn't do it. He chose the lie. He chose her. He just deflated. The last bit of fight went out of him. He stared at the table, a broken, silent, and pathetic man. He had failed. Margaret Alder stood up, gathering her papers. The meeting was over. "We will have the eviction notices formally served by 5 o'clock this afternoon. Carl," she said, her voice all business. 72 hours, starting now." Walter and I stood up to leave. As we walked to the door, my father's voice, small and thin, came from the end of the table. "The house," he whispered. What will you do with it? Are you going to sell it?" I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. Walter looked at me. He didn't answer. He let me. The power had shifted. The house Brenda had ruled. The house my father had hidden in. It was no longer theirs to worry about. I looked back at my father, a stranger at the end of a long, polished table. "I don't know, Dad," I said. "I'll have to think about it. It's my decision now." A year. It's strange how a year can feel like a lifetime, and also like the blink of an eye. The legal proceedings had been slow, grinding, and ugly. Brenda's charge had been settled out of court, a plea deal that involved extensive court-mandated therapy and a permanent protection order. She had fought it. Of course, her lawyer had tried to paint her as the hysterical, overwrought victim of a cunning and manipulative stepdaughter. But evidence is a cold, hard thing. A medical report doesn't have emotions. An audio recording doesn't have a motive. In the end, she had no choice but to accept the plea. The community, the holy congregation of St. Gabriel's, had been split. Some, like Father Michael, had quietly reached out to Walter to express their deepest sympathies and prayers. Others, Brenda's loyalists, still saw me as the serpent in the garden, the one who had destroyed a good Christian home. I didn't care. Their opinions were ghosts, echoes from a life I no longer lived. I was living in a small, clean, one-bedroom apartment downtown, one Walter paid for. An advance on your inheritance, he'd called it, and a bonus for services rendered. I was still at Northbridge Story Lab, but I wasn't just a manager anymore. I was a senior manager, promoted 3 months ago, with a team of 6 and my own office with a door that closed. I had bought new furniture. I had houseplants that were, miraculously, still alive. I was building a life, my own life, brick by quiet, deliberate brick. The house, the one on Crestview Drive, was legally, unequivocally mine. The eviction had been swift and brutal. My father and Brenda were gone within the 72 hours, moving, I'd heard, into a small, rented townhouse across town. The house, my mother's house, now sat empty, a silent, 2,000-square-foot monument to my past. I hadn't been inside it, not once. I paid a service to keep the pipes from freezing and the lawn mowed, but I couldn't bring myself to cross the threshold. I didn't know what to do with it. Selling it felt like cutting the last tie to my mother. Keeping it felt like preserving my own prison. And now it was Christmas Eve again. This year, there was no frantic cooking. There was no grease in my hair. I'd spent the afternoon at a spa, a gift from my grandfather. I was wearing a simple, warm, dark blue wool dress. My face was my own again. The bruise had faded in weeks, but the faint, silvery white scar on my lower lip remained. I didn't cover it with concealer. I kept it as a reminder. At 9 o'clock, I walked out of my apartment building. The dark sedan was waiting at the curb, just as it had been last year. Mr. Lewis stepped out and opened the back door for me. Walter was inside, in the same seat, wearing a dark coat, looking exactly as he had. He wasn't on his way to church. He was just with me. "Mr. Lewis will drive," he said, his voice warm. "Where would you like to go? Freya? A movie? A quiet dinner?" "I don't know. Grandpa," I said, settling into the soft leather. "It feels strange, not having a script." "Good," he said. "It's about time." Mr. Lewis drove, aimlessly, through the quiet, festive city streets. We ended up, perhaps inevitably, on the high ridge above the town, at a scenic overlook. From here, you could see the whole of Cedar Heights sparkling below. A blanket of snow and colored lights. In the distance, I could see the illuminated steeple of a single church, St. Gabriel's. "It's almost 10:30, Walter said, looking out the window. "They'll be gathering soon, the faithful." "I don't think I'll ever go back," I said, not sadly. It was just a statement of fact. "Some places aren't meant for praying," he replied. "Some are just meant for performance. Tonight, Freya, you get to choose what's sacred. Instead of letting other people define what family is, you get to choose your own version. You don't have to be anywhere you don't want to be." As he spoke, my phone, resting in my lap, vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew who it was. My fingers, just slightly, trembled as I opened it. It was from my father. It was the first time he had tried to contact me in 364 days. The message was short, just a few lines. There were no flowery apologies. There was no blame. There were no demands. "Freya, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that Brenda she's in the program, the one the court said. She's really doing it. Chloe is staying with her aunt in Michigan for a while. She seems better." He paused. The next line was clearly difficult. "I am not writing to ask you to forgive me. I don't have the right. I wanted you to know that I am sorry. I regret what I let happen. I regret all of it. I hope you have a peaceful Christmas." That was it. I read it once, then twice. I had spent a year imagining what he might say. If he ever did. I had imagined desperate, manipulative pleas. I had imagined angry, bitter accusations. I had not imagined this. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't absolution. But it was honest. It was the first honest thing he had said, without Brenda's shadow looming over him, in my entire adult life. He was a man in the wreckage of his own making. Finally, telling the truth. I didn't reply, but the knot of pure, cold hatred that I had carried in my chest for him, the knot I thought would be there forever, it loosened. Just a fraction. It didn't disappear. But it made room for something else, a kind of cold, quiet pity. "Walter," I said, turning to him in the darkness of the car. "I know," he said, his eyes on the sparkling lights below. "I've been wondering what you wanted to do with it. The house." He always knew. "Sell it?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Lease it? Keep it and move back in?" The question wasn't just about property, it was about the past. Did I want to hold on to it? Let it define me? Or did I want to let it go? The text message from my father felt like a sign. He was, in his own broken way, trying to move on. Maybe I could, too. "I want to sell it," I said. The decision, when it finally came, was easy. It felt light. "Good," he said, nodding. "The market is high." "But I want to use the money," I continued, the idea forming, sharp and clear. "At least, a part of it. I want to start something. That charitable foundation you mentioned, the one in my mother's name. I want to do it now, not after you're gone." I turned to him, my voice gaining strength. "I want to sell that prison, and I want to use the money to build a fortress for other people, for other adults, other women, trapped in those houses, being told they're selfish and ungrateful. I want to turn the ugliest thing in my life into the most powerful thing in my life. That's the revenge I want." Walter was silent for a long moment. When he turned to me, his eyes were shining in the dark. "Your mother," he said, his voice thick, "would have been so impossibly proud of you." He cleared his throat. "Margaret Alder can have the papers drawn up by the new year. It's done." A wave of peace, so profound it was almost dizzying, washed over me. I had a new script. "Mr. Lewis," I said, leaning forward, "before we go to Grandpa's house, could we make one last stop? Can we just drive by St. Gabriel's?" Walter looked at me, a question in his eyes, but he just nodded. Mr. Lewis turned the car, and we glided down the hill, back into the old neighborhood, back toward the sound of the bells. We didn't park across the street, in the shadows. We pulled right up to the curb, just as the congregation was beginning to walk inside, just as they had last year. "I'll be right back," I said. I stepped out of the car, alone. I wasn't bruised, I wasn't bleeding, I wasn't wearing my work clothes. I stood on the sidewalk, a 29-year-old woman in a simple, elegant dress. A few people turned, their faces curious. Seeing the expensive sedan, no one recognized me. I was just a stranger. I walked up the stone steps, my heels clicking, right to the heavy oak doors. They were open. Just a crack, letting the warm, golden light and the sound of the organs spill out. I looked inside. I saw the pews, filled with people. I saw the towering tree, the candles. I saw a family in the aisle, a mother, a father, and a small son. The mother was laughing, and she bent down to straighten her little boy's tie, her hand lingering, ruffling his hair. He beamed up at her. It was an act of such simple, uncomplicated, public affection. A year ago, that sight would have ripped my heart out. It would have been a symbol of everything I'd been denied. But tonight, I just felt quiet. I wasn't angry at them. I wasn't jealous. They were not my family. That was not my life. And I was, finally, okay with that. I realized I didn't need to be in that building. I didn't need their forgiveness. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to sit in the back pew, or any pew, ever again, just to prove I was worthy of a blessed night. My blessing wasn't in there. It was out here. It was sitting in a dark car, waiting for me. It was in my new apartment, in my new job, in the foundation I was about to build. I turned my back on the light, on the music, on the performance. I walked down the steps, back to the car. I got in and shut the door. The sound of the organ cut off, replaced by the warm, safe silence. Walter just looked at me, waiting. I smiled. The scar on my lip pulled, but it didn't hurt. "I'm done," I said. "I don't need to sit in the back of a church, or anywhere, ever again, just to prove I deserve a seat at the table. I'm going to build my own table, with people who actually stand by me." Walter Hayes smiled, a real, wide smile that reached his eyes and made him look like the grandfather I remembered from my childhood. "I thought you might say that," he said. He nodded to his driver. "Mr. Lewis, take us home." The sedan pulled away from the curb, gliding silently into the night. The bells of St. Gabriel's began to toll for midnight, the sound ringing out behind us. But I didn't look back. I just looked forward, at the bright, endless lights of the city, spread out before us. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the like button so more people can hear this story.